4 minutes and 37 seconds. In 2021, ERCOT officials said the Texas grid was just 4 minutes and 37 seconds away from total collapse. That would have triggered a statewide blackout, right in the middle of freezing temperatures.
It was a very scary time.
Most people like Montserrat Garibay had no idea how close we were to a massive system failure.
I felt like we were stranded in our own home, no light, very cold, and the little food that we had, it was all spoiled, so we couldn't really do much. So it was pretty scary.
Montserrat and her neighbors were doing everything they could to survive the historic winter blast. We first talked with Montserrat in 2021 after she had spent 48 hours in the dark and cold.
So this is not something new. ERCOT is not prepared, and it's just totally unacceptable.
Montserrat's neighbor shared her anger after hearing some parts of the city had power and he didn't.
You know, having other people in other areas that, you know, get all of the power, and then we're kind of, you know, no pun intended, but left out in the cold, you know, it's a little frustrating.
Now, 5 years later, we knocked on Montserrat's door to ask if she had confidence in the city and the reliability of the grid if we ever faced another devastating winter storm.
I'm hopeful that perhaps yes. It helps that the city is trying to be more proactive, but I'm not 100% sure at the state level. I think that there's a lot of doubts still. And the fact that we have the electricity grid just for Texas, it's still a concern.
At least 246 Texans officially died in the 2021 winter storm, but independent reports and unconfirmed reports put that number closer to 700. More than 4.5 million people lost power during the height of the storm, and it was one of the most costliest storms in Texas history. At the end of the day, total losses amounted to more than $195 billion. Austin just got through a quick winter ice storm in 2026, but looking back to 2021, it was a winter nightmare that wouldn't let go. Meteorologist Avery Tomasco explains why February 2021 became a once-in-a-generation storm.
The foundation of the 2021 winter storm came with the development of La Nina months prior. That generally keeps Texas in the winter months warmer and drier than average, but it also makes it more likely that the polar vortex can become destabilized. When that happens, extremely cold air in the Arctic can move much farther south than usual and stay south longer than usual. And it was the cold that did most of the damage back in 2021. In Austin, we spent 144 hours below freezing, an all-time record with our coldest temperatures since the 1980s. That alone led to numerous infrastructure problems, pipes bursting in homes, water main breaks, and water shortages, a problem made worse because the power demand could not be met by the power supply. This was on top of the 4 major winter storms that moved through back to back, which started with a crippling freezing rain event with winter storm number 1, followed by our biggest snow event since the 1970s, more than 6 inches in Austin, followed by yet another freezing rain event with a ½ inch of accumulation, and then one last dose of snow before all was said and done. The layers of ice and snow made travel impossible for more than a week. Avery Tomasco, CBS Austin News.
In the days after the storm, many angry people wanted to know, who does the failed winter storm response fall on? CBS Austin's Andrew Lemparski takes a closer look at top officials' promises to prevent a repeat of the 2021 winter disaster.
Many of you are angry, and you have a right to be. I'm angry too.
At the time, that anger was despite still not knowing the full scale of the devastation. From just months old to 102 years old. 65% of those deaths from extreme cold exposure. The most deaths in Harris, Travis, and Dallas counties. It took just days for the state legislature to start looking for the people to hold accountable.
What we have on our hands is a failure of regulatory oversight.
What came out of the Capitol in spring 2021 were energy company overhauls. Senate Bill 2 and Senate Bill 3 restructured the ERCOT board, mandated public alerts ahead of potential grid failures, and required weatherization for power plants.
Our energy producers had to really harden the way that they worked and produced energy and really do a lot of preparation to make sure another thing like this doesn't happen.
Brian Smith, a professor of political science at St. Edward's University, says solutions out of the state legislature saw bipartisan support.
People knew something had to be done. You weren't going to go back to your district and said, you know what, it was a once-in-a-lifetime snowstorm. We'll do nothing.
You deserve answers. You will get those answers.
Governor Abbott's press secretary writes in a statement ahead of the 5-year anniversary, thanks to those reforms, no Texan has lost power because of the state grid. But Smith says it will take a test to prove if the changes work.
Were those failures dealt with?
We actually don't know. What we do know is this. We haven't had another crisis like we had in 2021, but similarly, we haven't had another storm like 2021.
Reporting in Austin, Andrew Lamparski, CBS Austin News.
So could we see another 100-year storm in our lifetime? Chief Meteorologist Chicago Windler explains.
Could another winter storm like 2021 happen? In short, yes. We narrowly escaped another crippling ice storm in January. Our saving grace, the precip fell more as sleet than freezing rain, and the cold didn't last as long. Research shows that was about a 1 in 50 to 1 in 100 year event, which doesn't mean that it won't happen for another 50 to 100 years. What it does mean is on any given year, there's about a 1 to 2% chance it could happen again. And climate change means these extreme events are becoming more frequent. Take the polar vortex, for instance. That's that swirling area of low pressure at the poles. It's like a donut spinning around and keeps all the Arctic air locked up until climate change causes it to buckle or bend. And when that happens, that Arctic air comes much farther south and lasts a lot longer. And though the odds are low, if moisture rolls in over that Arctic air mass, we could have deja vu all over again. In Austin, I'm Chief Meteorologist Chicago Windler, CBS Austin News.
Still ahead, when the lights went out, the neighbors stepped up. Now a new network is putting those lessons into action. We'll show you how next. And we're hearing there's more power, more solar, and more batteries. But does that mean there is more reliability? We try to answer that question. You're watching 5 years after the freeze. Are we ready for tomorrow? In the years after the 2021 winter storm, cities across Texas have been taking a closer look at how they prepare for and recover from a disaster. CBS Austin's Betty Cross takes a closer look at Austin's resilience network and the lessons learned that they're putting into action.
When there's a disaster, one of the biggest challenges is getting supplies that can fill warehouses out to the people who need them most. That's why the Austin Resilience Network was formed, to get these supplies to people faster and more efficiently. The microbursts that pelted Austin last year put the Austin Resilience Network to its first test. This powerful column of sinking air toppled 91 utility poles and left some neighborhoods without power for several days.
When we bring all those folks together and their talents and resources and expertise, we're truly a more resilient and stronger community and able to withstand really what comes our way and recover more quickly.
On paper, the ARN looked like an effective next step. The May microburst and January's sleet and ice storm gave it real-world test.
So these are the toothbrushes.
Stephen Brewer helps lead the Austin Disaster Relief Network.
It looks like these are going to be brushes. These also go in the cleanup buckets.
The nonprofit brings together over 200 Central Texas churches and is now part of ARN. How will the Austin Resilience Network make a difference?
To have these other players at the table, even smaller nonprofits that don't necessarily specialize in disaster relief like we do, but when something hits our city, hits their community, they're at the table helping to bring resource and solutions.
The new network hasn't faced a challenge like the 2021 winter storm. But when the next catastrophic weather event hits, city leaders say they're confident ARN will multiply available resources and allow Austin to better handle a citywide emergency. Betty Cross, CBS Austin News.
The grid now has greater capacity than ever before, but can it withstand another storm of 2021's magnitude? What we learned next. 5 years after the deadly 2021 freeze, has Texas fixed its power grid? CBS Austin's Adelia Cheetah takes a closer look at what's changed and what hasn't.
The week of Valentine's Day 2026 is warm and sunny, a stark contrast to the same week 5 years ago.
It was a devastating storm.
No, I was worried when we had this last cold snap that we would have a repeat.
5 years ago, there was an ever-growing demand on the Texas electrical grid.
What happened with the grid that night is we began to have lots of consumers turning on the heat and doing everything they could to stay warm.
Ed Hers is an energy fellow at the University of Houston. He remembers the moment the power went out.
1:38 in the morning, February 15th.
Electric Reliability Council of Texas sent out this text at 2:15 a.m. At its worst, Texas was short 52 gigawatts of power.
52 gigawatts is a huge amount.
The outages lasted for days. Hundreds died.
That's definitely because of the failure of the grid.
Thousands more saw their homes damaged. And 5 years later, has the grid changed?
The supply on the ERCOT grid has increased because of the dramatic growth in wind farms, solar farms, and now the batteries.
ERCOT says capacity is higher than it was in 2021, but more capacity doesn't necessarily mean more reliability.
ERCOT doesn't know how much of that is deliverable.
And the market structure that failed during the storm.
This market still rewards scarcity. The ERCOT market model has not changed.
So while Central Texans hope 2021 was a once-in-a-lifetime event,
People being without electricity in this day and age, I think that's something that could be preventable.
Hers says a repeat is still a possibility.
We're not out of the woods at all.
The grid may have more power today, but it's how it's used that makes all the difference. Here's CBS Austin meteorologist Avery Tomasco with a closer look.
The changes made to the Texas power grid in the last half-decade have been nothing short of transformative, thanks mostly to the explosion of cheap, renewable energy, especially solar energy, which back in 2021 only had a capacity here in Texas of about 5 gigawatts. That has since exploded 7 times over to a capacity of 35 gigawatts. That makes Texas the #1 solar energy producer in the country. But what about when the sun isn't shining? That's where batteries come into play. Here's how this all works. When the sun is up and doing its thing, all of that energy, or most of it, is going straight to the power grid. But some of it, the excess energy, is being used to charge our growing bank of batteries. When the sun goes down, those batteries are then used to resupply that energy back to the power grid, oftentimes when it is needed most. This is not something that existed back in 2021, but has since grown to a capacity of 17 gigawatts here in Texas. This has proven itself recently. Most recently with our coldest morning of the winter thus far on January 26th. That's when we had a peak energy demand in Texas of 76 gigawatts in the early morning hours. Before the sun was even up, a quarter of that demand was being met by batteries and wind energy alone, providing a comfortable cushion when it was needed most. Avery Tomasco, CBS Austin News.
We heard this question from many of you. If the storm we experienced in 2021 were to happen tomorrow, would Texas be prepared to keep you warm and safe? We took that question to our panel of experts.
Really vulnerable situations happen right here in Austin. And for me, I represent an area where Spanish-speaking communities is a prominent part of Southeast Austin. And what we saw with communication is that a lot of the communication coming out of the city of Austin wasn't multilingual, wasn't in a way that people could access. And so what gives me a lot of confidence that the city has improved their response is knowing that with the most recent mini freeze that we had, the city was having daily press conferences. There was proactive communication on how individual households can prepare. And we've also hardened our infrastructure. So we have backup power generation at Austin Energy, Austin water sites, as well as updated emergency protocols. So we've come a long way.
There was an issue that we had at one of our water plants where kind of as things were kind of worsening that we did lose power and had a power issue at the plant. But
it was overwhelming and fast. And I think everybody had to get to the drawing table as soon as they could after the thaw so this wouldn't happen again. Where have we come in the last 5 years where you think Austin Water has prepped for the next disaster?
Well, so, you know, no two events have been the same since the 2021 storm. And However, you know, we have learned from every one of them that we've had and have really been focused on continuous improvement. We have really strengthened our infrastructure and invested a lot in winterization, our power backup systems, on infrastructure reliability, on things like emergency planning and being able to communicate, you know, both internally so that we all know what's going on and externally with the community.
We built a lot of new power plants, primarily solar, by the way. A lot of solar, a lot of batteries, a lot of wind, and a little bit of gas. We built a lot more power plants, so we have more capacity available. So if some are not available, if they go offline because it's too cold, we have enough backup power. So that is good news. And there was winterization. The thing about the storm in 2021 is it happened during the legislative session. The legislature meets every other year for a few months, and it happened to be meeting while the storm hit and the power went out. And they had ignored the storm in 2011. Same thing happened with the Groundhog Day storm in February 2011. The legislature ignored that storm despite rolling blackouts, despite people dying, despite the suffering and the losses. It happens again 10 years later, 2021, and the legislature says, okay, this time we got to do something. And they did do something, and I think it really helped.
You can see more of this town hall. Just scan the QR code on your screen, and it will take you to cbsaustin.com, where we're streaming the entirety of this town hall right after the newscast. We'll be right back. Do you think we're ready to handle another winter storm like that?
You know, I will say that I think that city is doing a lot much better.
We are more prepared now than we were then, and part of that solution is the connection and relationships that we have as a part of the Austin Resilience Network.
So I would encourage everyone to have a plan for your household, to know what you will do in times of emergency and where you will go to find information. The City of Austin has a number of text alerts available so that you can get plugged in on up-to-date, real-time information.
Do you think ERCOT learned its lesson, and do you think they are better prepared now to withstand a winter storm?
I'm hopeful that perhaps yes.
Will the changes work? We don't know the answer.
5 years later, progress has been made on the failures of 2021. And preparedness isn't a finish line. It's an ongoing responsibility for all of us. There will be another test, and it won't be the same as the last one. But the questions remain. Are we ready, and who is responsible? You can count on CBS Austin to be there to ask those tough questions before, during, and after the storm. And we want you to be engaged, so please scan this QR code. It will take you to cbsaustin.com. I'm Walt Makaborski. Thank you for joining us for this special 5 years after the freeze. Are we ready for tomorrow?